Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first gathering that we've had in Washington for women in the world. First one. And I hope you like our little improvised space here that we threw together in the last couple of days. I'm very grateful to the Fairmont for putting this out for us. So thank you very much, Fairmont, for letting us have this fantastic sort of rain check venue that we've just assembled everybody here tonight. First of all, I've got to ask the question, is Rush Limbaugh here this evening? Because he once said that he would attend a Woman in the World event when hell freezed over. Well, actually, of course, hell did freeze over on Monday morning, and this regrouped breakfast is, I think, an even more electric event than it might have been in the middle of all of that snow. So thanks all of you who sort of made the trek and who actually, came back and did come again. We're so thrilled that you're here. And we're tonight going to be honoring the new U.S. Ambassador for Global Women's Issues, that's Kathy Russell, who's going to be with us in a minute. But first of all, I want to thank tremendously the co-hosts who helped us get this done this evening. And they've really been a wonderful group to work with. Anita Dunn, Cheryl Mills, Maria Teresa Kumar, Elizabeth Thorpe, and Sophie Lady Lila Delatre. I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you so much, ladies, for your help and support. Milan Viver and Andrea Mitchell are also co-hosts, but they couldn't be here. Andrea had to get off with Secretary Kerry to Kiev, so I think we give her a pass for being here. And, of course, Milan Viver then, with a change of date, had a speaking engagement. But they also, I know, very much wish that they were with us. And thank you, Toyota, so much for partnering with us, because we couldn't do this without you, and you've been such a terrific, and are such a terrific, supporter for women in the world. Thank you to Toyota and John Lisco and Dion Colvin. This is a great moment for women in the world, because we're about to celebrate our 5th anniversary very soon with the summit in April the 3rd to the 5th, at Lincoln Center in Manhattan. And for those of you who don't know the history, our annual summit began as a kind of passion play in 2009 with some heavy inspiration, I must say, from Washington. It was at the Vital Voices Inspiring Kennedy Center Awards that I first got to know some of the astonishingly courageous women who are confronting unimaginable challenges in their own countries, women who are toppling repressive traditions, women who are risking their lives every day for social, economic, and political change. We saw some more of them at the International Courage Awards yesterday, which were just incredibly exciting to see. And when I saw these women at the Kennedy Center, I thought, they're such rock stars, these women. I mean, why do they have so little exposure here? There's so much that we in America can learn from them and take back and examine our own lives at the end of it. I thought the time really has come to see foreign affairs through the eyes of women. So we decided to create an annual summit where we could do just that, tell the unknown stories of women who live behind the lines of the news, women that you've never heard of, but you absolutely should have heard of them. So our team went out and we tracked down, with our deep journalistic networks, incredible women doing incredible things. And once we started to dig, we found that there were so many of them. Forces of change from Africa, Egypt, India, Pakistan, all over the world. A vibrant hidden army of women who had the talent and the will to reinvent our future. So 5 years later, Women in the World has grown, just as the voices of women have grown. And now the summit takes place at Lincoln Center with an audience of 2,500. Last year, it generated 44 million Twitter impressions, 1.1 billion press impressions, and 600,000 live streams. It seems that people are interested in women after all. And that's why we're bringing this kind of programming that we do to other cities and other audiences, like the terrific group assembled in this room tonight. Before we get to the meat of that program, I first want to introduce a woman of great impact right here in Washington, Valerie Jarrett, Senior Advisor and Assistant to President Obama for Intergovernmental Affairs and Public Engagement. And most relevant to us, she heads the White House Council on Women and Girls. Valerie is a staunch champion of women's rights and also a great friend of women in the world. She actually, I think, was there in that little theater in the first time we did it, where there were 300 people, and somehow Valerie Jarrett. So welcome, Valerie, and come up here now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tina, and good evening, everybody. I am delighted to be here. And Tina, as for your leadership, all I can tell you is on Sunday afternoon when I was home in Chicago visiting my family, and I got word that my flight had been canceled, and I was trying to figure out how do I break it to Tina that there was literally not an airplane that was flying into D.C. that evening. I get an email from her, and she says, Valerie, chances are we're going to have to reschedule the conference. I think we can do it on Wednesday, and I'll get back to you in a few hours. Like 10 minutes later, she says, we're set, Wednesday, be there, 5:30, all done, found a place. So it is a perfect example of your tenacity and unwillingness to take no for an answer. And as we all know, that's part of how we succeed. Don't take no for an answer. So come on, how about a round of applause for Tina? Secretary Albright's in the house. So it is such an exciting way to begin Women's History Month, to be here with you all. And we just had a wonderful event at the White House where we were celebrating International Women. And so dovetailing in with the fine work that Tina has been doing is a perfect complement. And looking around this room, it is amazing to see so many accomplished, successful women who've all come out. And then there are a few brave, good men out there, too. So you're welcome. We're glad to have you. So speaking of good men, I work for one of those good men. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anita. Hey, Anita. So I always think that President Obama and most men are shaped by how they're raised. And so I think being raised by a single mom, living with his grandparents for a while and watching his grandmother hit a glass ceiling at the bank that she worked for and go to work every day and try and come home and try not to express her sadness that she never really got that promotion she deserved. And then being married to a pretty successful, strong, competent, gorgeous wife, Mrs. Obama. Come on, a little shout out for the First Lady, right? And then having these two wonderful daughters with whom he makes a point of getting home every night by 6:30 to have dinner with them, not to tell them about his day, because they're not actually interested in his day, but for him to listen about their days. Because I think because he didn't have a dad, he was determined to be a better father to his children than his dad had been to him. And I think that really has shaped his perspective, which is why 5 years ago this month, he created the White House Council on Women and Girls, which, as Tina mentioned, I am honored to chair. So hopefully you all heard the President's State of the Union this year, where he said it's going to be a year of action. Who better to get to action than a group of women? And he also said, and it's interesting, it may not surprise you that sometimes we do a little polling from time to time, that one of his lines in the State of the Union was the most popular line, not just in this year's State of the Union, but in any of the 5 State of the Unions he gave. And it was the line when he said, "When women succeed, America succeeds." And interestingly enough, he received applause from both sides of the aisle. That doesn't happen all the time in Washington, let alone at a State of the Union. And we know that that's the case not just in America, but around the world. And I don't need to walk this crowd through the statistics about how women are faring in the economy here in the United States and around the world. You live those statistics every day, and you know that despite our progress, we still have a lot of hard work to do. And as I said, the President said this is going to be a year of action, and the economic security of women is a top priority of the President and his administration as he tries to grow our economy and create opportunity for all. You can tell a lot about a country by how the women are doing, and the President says that, quoting his mother very often, who did microlending around the world. And it's time that we unleash that full potential by changing the paradigm of our work environment and embracing the 21st century workplace, which, let's say, frankly, we have yet to fully do. We know that women need to earn a working wage because they are contributing to the family income more than ever. We know that they should earn equal pay, and you all know we still don't earn equal pay. We know we have to create educational opportunities for women to go into the fields of the future that are growing, and that begins at early childhood education, and it continues through college. We know we need a trained workforce for the skills of tomorrow. We know that we need to provide flexibility in the workplace to support all workers, men and women, in order to maximize their productivity at work, but also importantly, while they manage their critical obligations and their charitable contributions at home and in their communities. And with 1 in 5 women being victims of rape or attempted rape in their lifetime, and just look around this room, 1 in 5 women experience that. We also need to make sure that our workplace is safe for everybody. And of course, these priorities extend beyond our borders. When women across the world are in positions to lead, to excel in the classroom and in the workplace, to start businesses, to climb ladders of opportunity and succeed, the global economy will surge. We know that, and everyone benefits. And so the question that I pose to you that we need to answer here and at your summit that's coming up is, how do we get from here to there? That's why this conference, Tina, is so important. It's why your leadership on this issue is so important, because what you do is you highlight what works. And I think all too often we admire the problem and we don't challenge and look at what is the solutions. And in this room, you have examples of solutions. And so really my challenge to all of you is, let's take those examples to scale. Let's grow what works. Let's invest in what works, and let's stop investing in what doesn't work. So it's not a matter of more government or more programs, although we could always benefit from more resources perhaps, but it's how smartly we use the resources that we have. That's why I'm also pleased to announce that in the beginning of the summer, we are going to host a White House summit on working families. And we decided to say families because as more and more women are entering the workforce, their contribution to the income is more and more important. And we have to change the paradigm of what work is like. It has to mean something different. And the people here today and the people who we want to engage over the next several months, you can write that roadmap working with us together. So we will pull together a diverse group of businesses, academics, advocates, leaders, business owners who are women who have seen what the challenges are to be entrepreneurs and grow their businesses. And let's challenge ourselves. Let's challenge ourselves to really look within ourselves and say, how can we make this better? And it will be good not just for the economy, but for our families, for our society. So as we look towards that 21st century economy, to ensure that women and girls have the opportunity that we all want for our daughters, that I certainly want for my daughter, let's make sure that we do it together. Let's make sure we do it collaboratively. Let's make sure that our voices are heard all around the world. And if we do that, then I think the world will be a better place. And just remember, this is going to be a year of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That's a call to arms, I must say. It's now a pleasure to introduce you to Dion Colvin, National Manager for Media Planning with Women in the World's in our Women in the World's presenting sponsor, Toyota, without whom today could not have happened. Dion and Toyota have been a great partner to us over the past several years and instrumental in bringing to life a series that we're very proud of that recurs at every summit. It's called Mothers of Invention. Dion herself has been a driving force for change in the way corporations help women and girls realize their potential. And the Mothers of Invention series is a fantastic example of that. Through this creative partnership we highlight and elevate young, unknown women creators, designers, innovators who have developed an invention or an initiative that's tackling a tangible problem in our world and cities. So let's take a look at a little bit of film about our past Mothers of Invention as we welcome Dion. Come up, Dion. Thank you.
I want you to feel free to be as smart as you can be.
lens to solve the problem.
Thank you, Tina. This is such a phenomenal gathering of leaders, of women. I'm always so proud to share the stage with you, and I'm confident that tonight will be both inspirational and transformative. Toyota is very proud to be a presenting partner with Women in the World and to be part of the great energy and innovation and inspiration that these events bring together. At Toyota, we're committed to supporting, inspiring, and celebrating women and to help them go places, the places they want to go. We're proud to demonstrate our ongoing commitment by honoring the Mothers of Invention, who are courageous women who are developing innovative solutions to some of the most pressing problems in our communities. We're thrilled to have one here today. I don't know if she's quite made it in, but you saw her featured in the video. Kavita Shukla from Fresh Paper is from the local Washington, D.C. area, and she's going to be joining us later. Kavita is doing amazing work to address the global challenge of food spoilage. We know that the world is better because of women like her and the other mothers of invention. I'd also like to take the time to recognize our guests from Toyota with the Hiring Our Heroes initiative. Noreen O'Neill and Laura Dempsey are here joining us tonight. We're very proud at Toyota that we're partnering with this ongoing initiative to support employment for returning troops, veterans, and military spouses. And again, a great group here in the local Washington area. Coming up later in today's program, we're excited to announce our second Toyota Mothers of Invention for this year, also someone who's based right here in Washington. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I am extremely thrilled that this woman is being recognized today for her innovative programs and addressing the city's local food infrastructure issues that address the health for underserved individuals in various Washington communities. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for having us, and Tina, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dion. We're going to meet our new Mother of Invention in a little time, but first I want you to just watch some rather compelling documentary footage which introduces our next guest. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Elise Nelson, President and CEO of Vital Voices, and on behalf of all of us at Vital Voices, we're thrilled to be partners with Tina and Women in the World and thrilled to welcome you to Washington. Leave it to Tina to, in 2 days, find the best venue for this kind of gathering. I'm thrilled to be here, and you might recognize one of my guests from the short clip. Humaira Bachal is working in Pakistan with women and girls. Also, that clip is from a larger film, which is made by my other guest, Academy Award-winning documentarian Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Many of you are probably very familiar with Sharmeen's work. She won the Academy Award back in 2012, and she brought back to Pakistan the very first Academy Award the country had ever won. But I think what was more exciting was the content. I remember sitting there and seeing, a film on these issues does not typically win the Academy Award, even in the documentary film category. Also, Humaira, at 14 years old, opened the first school in Karachi, and the two have worked together. She is the founder, at just 25, of the Dream Foundation, which provides education and support for a number of girls, and in fact has worked with over 2,000 girls throughout Pakistan. A startling statistic: in the last 7 years, 600 schools throughout Pakistan have been bombed. So you think about that, and then you look at this young woman who's 25 years old, and you think about at age 16, she decides, I'm going to open up a school in my home in Karachi. So what compels a 16-year-old to do that?
Thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and share something about my work and my country. Yes, it's true, but I'm not afraid because I believe that life and death is rest in the God's hand. There is nothing that I can do stop when my death come. So when my time come, I will go. But I work with the community and for the community. So we have to, not everybody can live Pakistan. We have to stay with the conditions and we have to work with this kind of situation. Because we believe education is the most powerful thing which we can change the world. And education is the most powerful weapon which we can use against the intolerance and this extremism. Because I start my first school with 3 classrooms, and now we have a purpose-built school. That the ground floor is ready, and the first and second floor will be ready by September 2014. So, and currently we are focusing on the curriculum designing and teacher training. So there is nothing impossible which you can dream it and you can do it.
Wonderful. Watching that clip, I think one of the things that really struck me was that what you're really doing is shifting mindsets and shifting culture. And I know from my experience, that's one of the hardest things to do. So how do you begin to change minds?
Actually, I believe change comes in a community when you build a strong foundation. It is my belief that women are my community, resist change and opposed education, because that's the world they grown up in. But in my school first grade, the girls are graduated, they became teacher, and they became role model. They became role model, and such as like they became a source of pride for their parents. So their parents also start believing that education is important. So let's try to convince few people and let those people to convince other people.
Sharmeen, you work to really shed light on stories like this one and women like Malala Yousafzai, which I know so many of us are very well aware of. Is this the exception, young heroines rising up to make change like this, or is it more common in Pakistan that you're beginning to see this?
This is definitely not an exception, but this is the narrative of Pakistan that you never hear. And this is the narrative that one should hear, because across communities in Pakistan, you're finding grassroots change. And you're finding people like Humaira and others who are risking their lives every day to bring change in their communities. They don't make the headlines, they don't get any glamour, No documentary films are made about them. And they're literally risking their lives every single day. But they're doing it because they believe strongly that they do want a better tomorrow for the next generation. And I have been working on a series of documentary films, both about literate women and illiterate women. There are some fascinating stories about women who were never educated themselves, but who are fighting to free bonded labor in Pakistan, who are fighting for the rights of minorities in Pakistan. And that is the narrative of Pakistan that must get out. Because in the 24-hour news cycle that we have, there's a lot of fatigue about Pakistan. But when you hear about these stories, it actually gives you hope. And so I want to bring these stories forward because beyond the headlines, there are what I call percolations across the country. And those should be talked about because something is happening.
You know, I think a really interesting trend that I see, you know, having worked in the space for many years, for so long it was women's organizations speaking out for girls, but now it's girls speaking for themselves. And that is so much more powerful. And it seems to be, I think, just gaining in momentum. And I'm just wondering if that's what you are seeing in Pakistan as well.
You know, for a long time I've been saying this, and maybe because I'm a Smithi and a feminist, but it's because I think Pakistan's greatest assets are its women. And you know, so many more women are speaking up for themselves because the world has become such a closed place in terms of social media, access to other ideals, other thoughts. You know, I know Humaira regularly posts things on Facebook. I know other women do. I know people have conversations on Twitter, and it gives them hope and courage to speak up, knowing that there are other women around the world who are facing similar circumstances and who are continuing to fight the good fight. And so I do think social media has played an integral role in getting this generation to speak up for themselves and ask for their rights.
You know, Humaira, I know you have a very different story in many ways than Malala Yousafzai because her father was extremely supportive of her going to school. And your father was not so supportive. So you had to be your own advocate, as you say, before you could advocate for so many other girls. How did you do that?
Actually, it is not my father's fault. Because he was following traditions. He had always seen that girls are not getting educated. So that's why he don't want to be educated. But my mother want to break this cycle, and she told my father she would earn her own money to send us to school. After lots of resistance, in which my father was broken my mother's arms once, I still remained to get education. But after few years later, my father saw what my education did for me and what I in turn to did for my community. And now he believes, like my mother, we must believe our next generation. And now he works to mobilize other parents to send their daughters to school.
Sounds like you've been part of his transformation. That's great. That's great. Wow. Can I ask you, Sharmeen, how do you begin to make change in this area? You and I were talking earlier about, you know, finding these stories, but it's not enough just to tell the stories. How do you make real breakthrough? You know, your president about a year ago announced about $10 million to educate every girl in Pakistan by 2015. We're a year away from that. I have a feeling we're not that much closer to that goal. So how do you hold leaders accountable and really make change beyond just telling the stories?
You know, one of the saddest things about my country is the fact that we don't have a national champion for education. So while we have all of these wonderful grassroots organizations and people like Humaira across the country, they're working in their own spheres. But for real education reform to take place in Pakistan, you need a national champion. If you look at all of the countries around the world that transformed their education, they had a champion. And in Pakistan, we don't. We don't have somebody who's standing up and saying, you know what, not only every single girl should go to school, but every single boy should go to school too. You know, people feel that education isn't something that's priority because every day hundreds of people are dying because there is a war going on in the country. And unfortunately, that has become the mantra of the current government as well. Let us deal with terrorism first. Let us deal with, getting rid of the violence that's taking place in the country, and then everything else falls after that. If we only had that one person who took that up as a champion and then rallied the country behind him or her, I think you'd actually see real change. And I say this because recently I met people in Nigeria, and Nigeria has seen a real champion in education in its education minister, and we don't have that in our country.
I want to actually show a quick clip of another young woman that you're supporting, Khalida, who I know is really working to convince men to change mindsets, because obviously it's about changing mindsets, it's about raising money, supporting advocates. Let's just show this clip real quick. So, tell us what it was like to be there and what you're trying to do by capturing this on film and communicating it.
I don't think that any of us who were filming that day expected that answer, and the way they answered and the laugh that followed. To me, it wasn't the answer, it was the laugh that followed, because it was that acceptance that this is the norm, and that the thing in that village is that nobody's ever been punished for killing a woman. And because no one's ever been punished for killing a woman, it has emboldened others to do that. When you don't make an example out of somebody, then you expect that to be something that's okay. I wasn't sent to prison, nothing happened, so what I did wasn't wrong. And the reason that we've tried to capture this is to show what these young women are up against, is to really show what happens in the ring when you're there for the fight. Because it is a fight. And when they're in there, what are they facing? These are the stereotypes, these are the norms that these young women are trying to break. And Khalda has been successful. In the next village over, she's managed to convince the men to allow their women not only to work, but also in last week when we were filming, the men very reluctantly at the end said, yes, men and women are equal. And that to me was her small victory, but a massive victory to have caught on camera.
Wow. Humaira, tell us, how do you continue on? I mean, I can imagine your life is at threat. I mean, you look at this film, does that worry you? You saw what happened to Malala, you see the statistics. You're going door to door every day, convincing fathers to send their daughters to school. I mean, your life is at risk.
She does.
Actually, this was my daily routine work, and I believe to try to convince men, because I believe men and women are the equal part of the life. And in my community, men are the stakeholders. They allowed women to get for education, to get to their medication, and the men's are the stakeholder to women's life. What does women do and what does women did not do? So for me, it's much more to convince female to convince the male. So every day, every time I talk with the fathers and the youngster and boys to invite in my school and go to the door-to-door campaign and talk with the men. So sometimes they respect and they accept, but sometimes they resist and they laugh like that, and they sometimes they say some abuses about me and my work, but I still remain because I think like I am a crazy and lots of people say crazy, and so we have to be crazy because we want to do it.
You know, I know that real change has to come from the grassroots. I totally am on board with that. But in this room, you have government leaders, you have media leaders, business leaders, and I know they're thinking one thing: how can I help you? What can I do for you? So tell us, what can we do before we leave today to help you? Your life is at risk. You're 25 years old. You've trained and educated 2,000 girls. We need to do something for you. What can we do?
Thank you. I would like to put a request to Ambassador Russell. Ma'am, I feel really privileged to chance to visit US, and I see the latest techniques, education techniques in the United States, different schools, which include outdoor learning space, such as the art school at the Manhattan, New York. So me and my team, we wish to dream. Our school, our community children they have similar outdoor learning space like that. So we need the $100,000 to build.
Now that's an ask. You asked. So she said she needs an ask.
It's too much. Yeah. Okay. So it is my
Perhaps
request.
it's too little. No.
Let me just tell you about something about Humaira that she might not be able to articulate. When I found Humaira almost 2 years ago, Humaira was teaching 1,200 kids in 3 shifts in 3 rooms. The 3 rooms that she was teaching in, the teaching had to stop when it would rain because the rain would come through the school. And she told me that she had a dream that she wanted to build a purpose-built school. And with that single dream, she went out, we made the film, we sent it out, we raised the money to build a purpose-built school, 3 stories that will accommodate thousands of students in shifts, that will also accommodate women in the afternoons who want to learn about adult literacy. It'll accommodate young men who never went to school. It'll teach women about maternal health. So it's a holistic thing. And if you ever visit her school, it's a shining example in a slum that is ridden with guns, that is ridden with violence. And the most fascinating thing is that all the gangsters of that area send their children to her school.
Wow.
So in one generation, she is bringing change. This is tangible change. And this is the kind of change that we must support. Because it is these voices that we never hear about. And here is a living example of somebody who is going to put all our money to good use.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that is a perfect note to end our panel, and I know Sharmeen has to rush off to catch a flight to Karachi, so I'm going to close here, turn it back over to Tina, because I know we're really looking forward to hearing from her and also former Secretary Albright.
They were so magnificent, weren't they, those women, those Sharmeen and Humaira. I'm so proud to have had them with us this evening. And how wonderful is it now to have former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright with us tonight. It is so great. No one is more knowledgeable than she about Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. And for those of you who haven't read her stunning last book, Prague Winter, I do recommend it to you because it's an absolutely fascinating look at Czechoslovakia at that period when the Nazis came in, which she lived through, and is so full of penetrating insights and moral, moral wisdom that it is a really riveting book, and particularly resonant, I would say, at this particular moment, because it does have some very ominous references, in a sense, that we're seeing today in the current situation. So, Secretary Albright, I'd really like to ask you straight away, let's just talk right away, really, about Putin's psychology, because it is something that we're all interested in. Now, you've called him delusional. What do you really think? Is it possible that he's acting not out of a kind of overblown kind of cartoon sense of his own strength, and more of a sense that he's afraid, that he actually looked at that uprising in Ukraine and realized this could really happen in his own doorstep and this could be his own fate? What do you think is going on in his mind?
It's great to be with you, Tina. Thank you, and with everybody. Somewhat different subject. I think it's very hard to figure out what he is really up to. I can give you a few ideas. When I called him delusional, I was really building on what Angela Merkel had said as a result of her conversation with him when she said that he was living in some other world. And I think that there are any number of different aspects that are going on. First of all, that anybody can say that the dissolution of the Soviet Union is the greatest tragedy of the 20th century is delusional if you think about that there were 2 world wars in which millions of people died. And it kind of shows his approach to what he's looking at in terms of thinking that the Soviet Union was some very special place that should not have fallen apart or not been destroyed. I think it is possible that he is nervous about what he sees for himself, because there have in fact been some riots and oppositions in Moscow itself and in other parts, and also Russia is a very multi-ethnic place, and still kind of, even though it's Russia, it's cobbled together from a lot of different ethnic groups. And the question is, with social media and everything, that people know an awful lot about what others have. That's one version. The other is that he does believe that there has to be some way to get the grandeur of Russia back. What was interesting, in 1991, after the Soviet Union did dissolve, I went there as an academic to do some survey work, actually in Ukraine and a number of different places. And one of the questions you kind of have to put your head around this is they were the other superpower. And all of a sudden, they fall apart. And in focus groups that we did, somebody said, yeah, we're now just Bangladesh with missiles. And so they had, in fact, lost a lot of their identity in terms of being the other superpower.
Well, we feel a bit like that in the UK, but anyway.
Well, but not quite. But I think that for him also, he wants to be, really the personification of what Russia was as an empire. So that is going through his head. And so then he makes up facts and is very big into conspiracy theory. One of the things he said in this crazy press conference was that Americans were doing experiments with rats and think that we're doing social engineering on them.
How much of that do you think is him, making up this narrative to justify himself going in there, and how much is he being fed crazy facts? I mean, is there a kind of Baghdad Bob situation going on with him now, where he's, in the bunker with bad information?
Well, that's one of the things that I actually said when I said delusional. Basically, that he is the victim of his own propaganda, and also people around him who want to say yes, yes. So it's conceivable that he is being fed a lot of crazy facts. But his behavior, just generally, is pretty hard to track if you think about it. I mean, think about he did spend $50 billion in order to have the Sochi Olympics. I was kind of trying to visualize what it must have been like before he went to Sochi. He, in fact, had offered $15 billion to Ukraine instead of them getting part of the EU. I think he thought he was on some particular track. Some of us have been in presidential offices and kind of think of what happens when somebody returns and things are not quite the way they work out. And then he sat there with his people and he said, "What the happened here?" That the whole thing kind of got out of control from him.
Well, I mean, do you think that we in America have sort of underestimated Putin a bit? I mean, I was sort of struck by all of those confident intelligence assessments of the fact that when he was amassing troops on the border, that actually, no, he was just doing maneuvers, and then, of course, he did go into Crimea. Do you think that we cannot somehow get our heads around the fact that this man is a brutal thug who's playing in a completely different movie to the one that we're all in? Because Secretary Kerry keeps making these comments about this is not a 21st century, way to behave, a G8 member. It feels almost as if he keeps saying, we're going to disinvite you from the Oscars this year. I mean, like, what is the real state of mind, in a sense, you think, about the dealing with Putin?
Look, can I give a little bit more context to this? Part of it is the following. I mean, the Soviet Union did disintegrate, actually, when we were in office. I had never liked the statement that was made by some previous presidents who said, we won the Cold War. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is they lost the Cold War, which is very different in terms of a system disintegrating. So here they were, the other superpower. We had a job that's never been asked of anybody before, is how to devolve the power of your major adversary in some way that was not a win on the battlefield, and to do it in a way that was respectful of Russia. We really tried. And I know people find this hard to believe, but we were talking, when I met with Yeltsin, he said, "Why are you doing NATO? We are a new Russia." And I said, "It's a new NATO, it's not against you. And conceivably, at some point, you might be able to be members." People wanted Russia, the new Russia, to be part of a different system, to be part of Europe. We did an awful lot of things to try to make that happen. In other words, to bring them into the international system, not as a competitor, but as somebody who played a part in it. They didn't buy that. And so, for whatever reasons, some of it, I think, an identity crisis, some of it, changes of leadership, and I think Putin specifically decided that he did not want to be a part of anything. The first time that President Clinton and I met Putin was actually during an APEC summit while he was acting president. And he was trying very hard to ingratiate himself. And then in later meetings, very smart man, very clear about what he wants. And I think that the whole issue here is, I don't want to be a part of Europe, I want to be Russia. And yet what America wants to do, because we do have to deal with them. I think that's what Secretary Kerry is talking about. We need to deal with them on a whole host of issues. And one of the facts that makes this so complicated now is we need them on P5+1 to deal with Iran. We need them on issues to do with Syria in terms of how to make sure that those chemical weapons get out and that there's some humanitarian assistance. And you don't have, on the 21st century, a choice to simply decide you're not going to deal with a major country. And so I think Secretary Kerry is doing the right thing in trying to tell him there's a different answer here. And what has been happening, President Obama's done this, is to say, okay, you were a part of the system, the G8, the G20, and we wanted you to be a part of it. If you can't behave in a 21st century way, we're going to isolate you. And so that's the discussion that's going on now.
Now, well, if you were Secretary of State, what would you be saying?
I would be saying what I said.
Fair enough.
But basically that invading other countries illegally, is not the way to try to be a part of the international system. I think what we don't want to do is get involved in a zero-sum game with them. And if I could just take a minute on something, Tina, Ukraine is a very complicated place. And the part that makes this even harder, Ukraine and Kiev was the birthplace of Russia, historically. And also Ukraine is the place where Christianity came into Russia. A lot of it is about Slavic souls. And very much a part of how you separate that 100 years of history from that. At the same time, it is a country that had, on its western part, been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a lot of relationship with Poles. It's not going to change its geographical location. And the bottom line is we have to try to help the Ukrainians figure out how to be a sovereign country and how to be able to exist where they are. It would be better if the Russians understood that they're better off with a stable Ukraine than all this kind of very chaotic drama. And it would be better if Russia saw itself as a country with whom we could partner instead of being in the Cold War mode. And that's what I think Secretary and President Obama are trying to do.
Do you think we're going to have to accept then that Russia basically stays with the Crimea, that they're actually going to keep it? Because we don't want to go in and push them out. And if Russia is just going to, Putin is obviously not going to leave, it seems. And one of the things that interests me is that, should we be trusting him now when he says, I'm not going to push out any further? Because, we were talking at the International Courage Awards, there was a bishop there from Georgia, and she said, this is exactly what's happening in Georgia, is that he keeps moving the boundaries a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So he may not say he's going to be pushing out, but it seems like he will. And therefore, what should be done?
Well, I think that we don't have to trust him. I think they are looking for some, they're now calling an off-ramp, of some way to get out of this very sharp, potentially sharp confrontation of trying to figure out, after all, this is what happened. The Ukrainians had granted a lease, they rented this naval base to the Russians in Crimea. I think it is part of history that they have had a Black Sea fleet, that it's the warm water port that the czars and everybody wanted. I can visualize some kind of an arrangement that is not Russians permanently taking Crimea. But I think that there has to be some way where there's a recognition that Sevastopol and the port can continue to exist. But I think we need to keep a very sharp eye on this, because some of it is just kind of slow. The Soviets were very good at salami tactics in Central and Eastern Europe. And I met with the Georgian Prime Minister when he was just here. And they got very nervous through all this, too, because all of a sudden they were the Russians were strengthening their fences around Abkhazia and Ossetia. So I think we have to put our foot down about that this is not the way to move forward, and we need the international community to stand with us.
What sort of hope is there really for the new young Ukrainian freedom country, in a sense? I mean, it's been riddled with corruption. It's broke. It's got full of ethnic divides. I mean, it's such a fragile thing. What will be the fate of Ukraine, do you think?
A lot depends on the Europeans, I have to say. I have tried to analyze all this kind of in three venues. One is Ukraine itself, which, as you described, it used to be the breadbasket of the region, is now the basket case. So the bottom line is that it's potentially has very rich soil. It has smart people, hardworking people. And the question is what you deal with. They are an economic disaster, and they can't do it by themselves. Then there is the U.S.-Russia relationship that we just talked about, and then there's the U.S.-European relationship on this. And one of the things, if I may say so, you are a born European, actually so am I, so I feel I can say whatever I want.
Go for it.
Is that basically, when we were in office, we kept waiting for the Europeans to do something about Bosnia. And things that are in Europe, you would think Europeans would take care of. So the bottom line here is how to get the EU to really begin to be more supportive economically. As I understand it, the United States has just given $1 billion aid, which Secretary Kerry announced, but the Europeans say they're going to give $15 billion and begin to give economic support to this country. And I think that the Europeans have a responsibility here, along with the United States, to try to get them on their feet. Because you came to the National Democratic Institute, I'm chairman of the board there, and one of the things we have had and will continue to have people there that are beginning to train a lot of people for this new set of elections, to try to get people to be able to get off the Maidan Square into, in fact, some kind of channels of communications through normal matters. One of the things that we are looking at generally in the world is how do you get from demonstrations to governance? Mm-hmm. That is one of the great challenges here. We also have to get women elected to the parliaments there, and I think a number of different ways of trying to channel the energy of those who are opposed to what's going on into pushing to get rid of the corruption and then develop an economic system that functions.
Did you feel, Madeleine, a certain frisson, though, with these events in the last week? I mean, I think Hillary Clinton said just in the last few hours that Russia's actions have been similar to population transfers by the Nazis in the run-up to World War II, and that Putin's claims to be protecting Russians are similar to Hitler's claims of protecting Germans in Czechoslovakia and Romania. Of course, as someone who grew up in that whole period, did it have echoes to you?
Well, thank you for pushing Prague Winter, but
Yeah,
what I do is describe something. And I think it's very much worth describing in this context. I was born in Czechoslovakia, and for Czechoslovakia, Munich has been kind of the worst possible thing when you want to say terrible things happen. And what did happen was that Czechoslovakia was formed after the First World War as a result of Woodrow Wilson in many ways, and it was a multi-ethnic country with close ties to Germany, and there were Germans that lived in the northwestern part in this place called Sudetenland. And it's called South because it's south of Germany, but it's north. And so what happened was that there was this puppet, Konrad Henlein, who did in fact say that the Germans were being mistreated and ultimately called on Germany to be of some kind of help. The part that I think is worth thinking about, and it's very hard. Historical analogies are always difficult because nothing is quite the same. In doing this book, I found something that I hadn't thought of that much before, which is that the British and French were exhausted from World War I. They had lost a whole generation of young men. Their budgets were a mess. Their military was broken. And so they made a deal over the heads of the Czechoslovaks with the Germans and Italians. Neville Chamberlain, who I will always think is among the more odious characters in history, but I can understand all of a sudden what he was doing. They were tired of war.
Yeah.
But what he did say is, why should we care about people in faraway places with unpronounceable names? And I have been thinking about that even before Ukraine in terms of Syria. Assad. When does something that happens to a group of people in some place actually affect us in some way where we feel we need to get involved? And so I think there are general questions about humanitarian activities. When do you say enough? There is this whole concept about responsibility to protect. And so there are always echoes in terms of, do you do something if you see terrible things going on? I'm going to Prague this weekend, and I was thinking the Czechoslovak example in many ways is, one, what happened in the Sudetenland, and the other is the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968. So it has been a victim of outsiders many times, but certainly these last two. And 1968, what happens is a communist leader calls for fraternal assistance from the Soviet Union. So the same kind of thing in Ukraine, where somebody in Crimea is saying, come help us. So there are historical analogies to this.
All right. Thank you so much, Madeleine. These are fascinating insights that you've shared tonight. I think we could all listen to her all night, but instead I urge you to go home and read Prague Winter, because a lot of it's in there. Thank you so much.
Can I tell you one more story, because it has to do with my pins and Putin? So what happened was that there is this crazy picture of for the 50th anniversary of NATO, when President Clinton and Secretary Cohen and I were on a sofa together, and all of a sudden, I don't know who started it, we did the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil monkeys. Then it was a loony picture that came out in Time magazine. So I then decided, I was somewhere and I found these 3 monkey pins. So we're walking in for our summit with President Putin, and I decided to wear the monkeys to this. And President Putin actually turns to President Clinton and he says, we always notice what pin Secretary Albright wears. Why are you wearing those 3 monkeys? And I actually said, because of your Chechnya policy. And he started yelling at me, and President Clinton looked at me like, are you out of your mind? You are supposed to be the chief diplomat. You've just screwed up the summit.
I love that story, how your pin nearly screwed up a summit. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. You are superb. I could hear you all night.
Great.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. So now we're going to hear, I think, from Dion again about our Mothers of Invention, correct? Is that what we're going to do next? Video. Video. On with the video. Sorry, I'm without my script.
Good evening to you. I'm Brianna Keeler from CNN, and I am joined by the lovely Lauren Schwader-Beal, who you just saw. She's the co-founder and executive director of DC Greens. Thanks for being here and letting me ask you a bunch of questions.
It's such a privilege and an honor. Thank you.
And also, I want to make sure that we also give a shout out to the other co-founder of DC Greens, Sarah Bernardi, who is here. A round of applause for you as well for your contributions to this. Just sort of explain how this all started. It goes back to 2009. You said all you really wanted to do was start a farmer's market, right?
That's what happened. I had my first child, and I thought I really want to, have a farmer's market in my community. And actually, Sarah was also living in the same community at the time, and she was a teacher at Bancroft Elementary School, which was the school that was in the first White House garden right at 2009. And she was actually a teacher she was the arts teacher at Bancroft Elementary. And when they came back from that experience, she was trying to keep their school garden going and, without any resources. And the two of us talking and getting more and more involved in the school garden community here and also the food access community just realized there are all of these ways that the city is not doing as well as it should be, considering the incredible infrastructure that we have here.
So you were kind of looking around at the needs, and what were the needs that you were seeing?
Well, there were a lot of them. I think you can start with the fact that even just if you look at the metrics, DC has the third highest obesity rate in the country among 10 to 17-year-olds. That's the third highest in the country. That's atrocious. And we have we have 93 school gardens. We have 46 farmers markets. So there's all of these opportunities there, and yet you have people saying that they can't afford fresh fruits and vegetables.
DC has these things, but they're not being linked together.
Yeah, they're not being linked together, and they're not being maximized. To put in a school garden, when I say there's 93 school gardens, that means 93 schools have put in gardens, but to grow a garden, to integrate it into a curriculum, to really make sure that it's doing all the work that we all hope that it's doing, which is, helping educate kids about, where their food comes from and giving them hands-on experiential opportunities to connect with that food so that they'll make healthier food choices. That work doesn't come by putting in a raised bed. You really need to know how to use those gardens and to integrate them. And a lot of this is being kind of foisted on teachers that don't themselves have the training to be able to go out into a garden and cure all societal ills. So I think, it's some of our thinking started with realizing that, these teachers really need support. And there are best practices in this arena. So instead of having teachers have to sort of recreate the wheel and operate in silos, let's network them together. And that's the Growing Garden Teachers program that we have. Network them together, create a professional network so that they can share best practices and then really train them, bring in national experts, tap into the incredible local expertise that we have so that we're sure that these teachers are really, resourced up to be able to run these programs. We give them interns from local colleges. We give them seeds. We grow seedlings with high school students and give them free seedlings. We give them everything that they could possibly need, but it really does start with listening and finding out what do they need and making sure that we can get it for them.
Can you talk a little bit about how the absence of access to fresh food, and when you're talking in very tangible terms, what some of the kids, for instance, might have been eating before and then after their engagement in this program?
I think that, the things that you see are a lot of processed foods, so kids are eating Cheetos, they're eating nothing that's going to give them any kind of nutritional value. And this is a process. You're talking about a generation of lost probably 2 generations of lost food knowledge. Our program coordinator was in a school today, a public school, working with 7th graders and doing a sort of a cooking demonstration with them. And a lot of the 7th graders had never cracked an egg before. Had never cracked an egg. They're in 7th grade. We're moving further and further away from people really understanding where their food comes from. And, we feel like when kids have the chance to plant a seed and see the miracle that that is. I mean, you plant a seed and food grows. That's amazing. And when kids have a chance to experience that, they're much more likely to try to eat it. And then, once they try it, they like it.
Did it kind of strike you too? I mean, you're in Washington, D.C., it's the nation's capital. We all know we look at health statistics, the food statistics that you cited are just kind of atrocious. Did it also kind of strike you that the disparity between, we look around, we see the tremendous brain trust in a way. There's, this is a media center, it's the center of politics, and yet there are communities in such tremendous need.
I think DC is a really fascinating thing because so many of the people here are, focused on the nation, focused on the world, doing such important work, and at the end of the day, aren't necessarily looking right at the situation that's right there. And so I think that in some ways, DC gets overlooked because people are looking out and doing incredible work. But the community of nonprofits that are working in DC, it's sort of DC is almost like a small town. And for those who are really working on the issues on the ground, it's a very tight-knit and collaborative community, and a lot of what we've been trying to do is network in all of these different nonprofits so that we can streamline services and so that we can really work collaboratively towards a more just local food system.
I know one of the things that struck me from watching the video was it seems like the initial premise is access to fresh food, but then there's a bunch of other elements that you've obviously introduced over time, one being that fruit and vegetable prescription program.
Right.
So explain how that came into being, how you identified the need, how you found the health clinic, and sort of logistically how you accomplished that, and also how you get people to actually engage in that and want to take part in it.
Well, that program has been a wonderful partnership with Wholesome Wave, which is a national nonprofit, and we have been rolling it out in DC, using all of the resources on the ground in DC. And so what we did there for the pilot year, and we're really expanding it now, is find a health clinic, a community health clinic, which is the Upper Cardozo Unity Clinic in Columbia Heights, which is surrounded by, there's 4 farmers markets in very close proximity. And so we reached out to the clinic and we said, are you interested? Preventative health is, something that everybody's working on. It's really something that we're all thinking about right now. And they had a wonderful existing program called the We Can curriculum, which is an NIH curriculum that really is a cohort of patients that come together and have an anti-obesity curriculum that they do. And so we slotted the fruit and vegetable prescription program into one of the weeks. So they come every week, and so once a month they'll get a new prescription. And what happens is that the doctors are tracking the health metrics over the course of the program, and then we are able to track redemption rates based on de-identified patient numbers. So they'll come with their prescription and they're given an allotment of $1 a day per family member per week. So a family of 4 would get $28 to spend at the market. And what we found is that the patients are so excited by this program. I mean, you're basically giving them food. You're giving them food in exchange for going to see their doctor. And so, I sort of joke that we're giving them a literal carrot to go and actually talk to their physicians. But I really think that the strength of this program is not, just that they're getting fresh fruits and vegetables, but that it's part of this much larger obesity intervention.
And are you seeing in the schools where you're educating kids about fruits and vegetables, are you seeing them take that knowledge home and encouraging parents, older brothers and sisters to cook with fresh food?
I mean, that is the biggest challenge. I mean, I think parent engagement is the piece that we're all really trying to work on. The School Garden Market program is a fantastic kind of intervention that hits, I think, at the question that you're asking. For that program, we started it with 6 pilot schools. And the kids, as you saw from the movie, the kids are selling produce that they grew in their school garden. They're augmenting it with produce from a local farmer that they're able to purchase at wholesale prices, and then they can mark up however much they want. And they order it online. They try and figure out what the community wants. But what that does is, at pickup time, parents are able to pick up food right then. So, you've got the kids there, they're so proud of the food that they've grown. They're doing all of the business side of it, and they're selling straight to their community and really meeting people where they are. And most of the purchases that are happening there are being made by parents, and so having recipe cards available and really thinking through that larger education piece is just key to all of this.
I imagine you have some other things in the works for DC Greens. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like in some ways we're really an incubator at this point, and I feel like there are so many kind of creative opportunities that come up. I mean, one of the things that we've really been thinking about is how to keep funds really circulating within the DC economy. So, having these school garden markets be redemption sites for the prescriptions, so that funding that comes in is really going to support the school gardens, but also working on a job training program in Ward 8. The gentleman that you saw in the film was our first attempt at this, and he's just become such a star. And we really want to grow that program where we're doing job training, gardening training, and then trying to place graduates from that program into school gardens as the school garden coordinator, because they're going to be the best role models for kids that are coming up through those schools. It's someone from their actual community coming in and teaching them.
And are you finding, it sounds like they're learning business skills as well, which is pretty fascinating. I mean, I think it is so instrumental for students to learn the process of selling something, of a profit, of what it costs to do something, that if you sell something for this price, it's, you don't just get to take what you've earned. Some of it has to go to your overhead. I mean, It seems like they're learning some pretty standard business skills as well.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you point to that. One of our major supporters is at the Carlisle Group, and he's been trying to think together with me about how we can really build out that piece of it and bring some folks in to really do kind of business school training with the kids and have them develop plans and really build out that piece. Because we usually will partner with a math teacher who can bring in some of that learning, and we've been so focused on the nutrition piece. But all of this, there's so many possibilities for learning in so many different ways and in a really hands-on and experiential way.
Yeah, I suspect you didn't anticipate that would be part of what you were doing when you sort of got started with all of this, right?
No, but I loved what Ms. Jarrett said early on about thinking about the resources that are there and how to work them smarter, and I think that's something that I've always been drawn to, and I feel like this is such an exciting moment in the district to really push things further and connect so many different institutions together so that we can all really push the needle on this.
Connect the infrastructure that is there.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations on all of your success and for all the work you're doing in Washington, D.C. And if you do want to check out DC Greens, you can go to dcgreens.org to learn more and also to get involved if you want to see how you can contribute. And of course, congratulations on being a Women in the World Mother of Invention.
Thank you.
We'll have a few words from Tina now.
So now we come to our guest of honor. Weren't they just so terrific? I feel so optimistic when I see girls like Lauren and some of the girls we've had today. They're incredible. They're so inventive. And thank you, Toyota, for doing this. It's a wonderful program. Let's just talk a little now about our great ambassador at large for global women's issues, Kathy Russell, because she has been an advocate for women and girls for a long time. She was instrumental in the drafting of the Violence Against Women Act while working for then-Senator Joe Biden, and she served as a senior advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on International Women's Issues. and as Deputy Assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to Second Lady Dr. Jill Biden, Ambassador Russell developed the administration's strategy to combat gender-based violence on a global scale. So this is a long history of caring enormously about what happens to women. Madeleine Verveer, who wished she could have introduced her tonight, the first ambassador for women, she told me yesterday that she really is really confident that in her new role, Kathy is going to lean in at state and ensure that the issues, whether about women, peace and security, women's economic participation, human rights and more, are always woven into our foreign policy initiatives. So let's welcome her now.
Well, it's a big job, plus apparently I have to give $100,000 to a school.
Yeah, sorry about that. We couldn't, I'm afraid. The pitch was there. It was a setup.
Oh, God, okay.
So now you've hit the ground running in your new role, and I understand that you've just returned from India, Pakistan, and Nepal. Can you share with us what you saw in this recent trip? It was your first kind of eyes on the ground, new role, out there, off you go. What did you see?
It was my first trip to that region, and it was really amazing. I mean, India is obviously a country that has a lot of things happening, and they are still struggling with the horrible rape case that happened a little over a year ago. And the country, I think, when I got there were lots of discussions with civil society, with government leaders about how they want to proceed on that issue. And I think that everyone there was struck by, they've certainly struggled with these issues over time, but I think that the reaction to that case was so extraordinary, really, and people took to the streets, were so upset and wanted to see some action. And there was action on behalf of the government. I think people now are waiting to see how fundamental that action will really be. And so I think there are challenges there. There are class challenges. There are caste challenges still, which I didn't really fully appreciate the extent of that until I got there. There are ongoing issues with the sort of discrepancies between the numbers of boys and girls who are born in that country. And you see it even walking around the streets in Delhi. You'll see large groups of boys kind of wandering around, many of whom are not employed or underemployed. So I think that there are some challenges there. I think the government is certainly aware and interested in working on them, but it's a long haul.
Well, obviously, the agenda that you have is just so enormous. I mean, gender-based violence, trying to deal with repressive traditions.
Yeah.
Where do you put your focus? I mean, how are you going to decide, okay, we can only do a certain amount? And, very often it's better to choose 2 or 3 things that are going to be your accomplishments.
Yeah.
What in your mind would be those accomplishments?
Well, it is the challenge of the job because if you look at the portfolio that I have, it is all women everywhere and all the issues that really pertain to them. So that could be anything and everything. And the problem is that they're all issues that any person in my position and in any of your positions would care about. So not doing them is hard. It's a hard choice to make. But if you do everything, then really you do nothing. So we are making some tough choices. We've identified 3 priorities, but even these priorities are so great, huge, that it's challenging. One is dealing with, as you mentioned, we do have a strategy, a government-wide strategy on gender-based violence. We're implementing that strategy that has begun, but we're continuing that implementation, which is really a matter of making sure that all of the efforts that we have on behalf of the government are being done as well and as in the most coordinated way possible.
Can you give me an example? Well, give me the 3, and then I want to go back to that.
Okay. The second is, the gender-based violence piece also includes women in conflict. So that's the part that Madeleine mentioned to you, which is dealing with the women, peace, and security effort. And again, both gender-based violence and women, peace, and security are pieces of the pie that the White House has already engaged in. We have strategies in place, and we're implementing those. The second priority is women's economic empowerment, and I see that as the positive side of the story, whereas talking about women as victims of violence is always, it's necessary. It's something that I have a lot of interest and experience in, but it is always the negative. And I think the interesting piece to me about the women's economic empowerment is it is the place where you see women taking control of their own lives and the lives, making a life for themselves and their children. And we engage on that issue in so many ways, in international fora like APEC, in regional fora like we have a Women's Economic Forum in Africa. We're doing the same in the Middle East. So we've got a lot of pieces of that pie that have been already engaged in and are continuing. We try to support women entrepreneurs in different places. So it's a big challenge, but there's a lot going on in our government already. We're just trying to make sure that it's being done strategically. The third priority is a little bit of a new priority, and it's something that is born of really my interest in this, which is really a focus on adolescent girls. And that is, again, a lot of work goes on already, but we're really trying to hone in on a certain age group of girls where things really can go awry. And we're focused on two things primarily: child marriage and girls' education. On the theory that, and I don't want to play my hand here, but we do want to keep girls in school. It is a priority for this administration. It's a priority for the president. It's a priority for the First Lady. I believe that it's the best way to take care of many ills. So we really do want to figure out how best to do that. It's so challenging. We've made a lot of progress in the world over the last 10 years, increasing the numbers of girls in school. And the reason that girls in the places that they are not in school are very complicated. They have to do with things like families taking them out of school because they want the girls to work. They have to do with issues of violence or culture. They have to do with things like, I think I mentioned this to you the other day, Tina, but this is my new thing that I'm obsessed with, but sanitation issues. Girls get to, sometimes they don't have bathrooms for girls at all, or bathrooms for kids at all in school, which, is not such a big issue for the boys, but if you think about that for a girl, even a little girl, that's challenging. A girl who hits puberty, it can be just, it just makes it very difficult. And if you really think about how hard that can be for her, a lot of times it means that the parents will pull the girl out of school for at least a week, a month. And a lot of times they just pull her out altogether. It makes it really difficult for the teachers, the female teachers. So there are so many reasons, so many complicated factors that go into this. There are programs that we have seen work, things like paying parents to keep kids in school helps. But there's no one answer that solves this problem. Child marriage, I think, is related to this. In some ways, education is one of the answers to child marriage, because the longer we can keep these girls in school, the longer we can delay marriage, the better that is. I mean, I think everyone has seen the information about this, but child marriage is just debilitating for girls for so many reasons, health-wise. I mean, they are much more likely to get pregnant early. They're more likely to be victims of violence because they're not in a position to negotiate safe sex or anything like that with their spouses. If it's a situation where the spouse is much older, they are likely to drop out of school. Their children are less likely to be educated. Their children are less likely to be healthy and immunized. I mean, it's just the pathologies are terrible every which way you look at it. So if we can increase the numbers of girls who stay in school, delay marriage, I mean, it would be a huge accomplishment. But doing that, as you can see from what I'm saying, is a complicated piece of business.
Well, we saw that crushing video earlier that Sharmeen Obaid shot of the men in that village setting who were laughing and saying, we would give the bullet to a daughter of ours who went to school. When you look at something as intransigent as that kind of repressive to tradition, how do you break through that without having a kind of backlash against America? I mean, obviously, sometimes the worst thing is when America goes in big-footedly and starts to throw its weight around and say, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, or somehow creating tension where it didn't mean to. How do you change the minds of men without creating backlash for women?
Well, I think one of the first and most important principles is that America can't change these situations, and we have to really have a lot of humility when we deal with these problems. I did a session at the White House earlier today, and I was talking about talking about economic changes, and I was pointing out that in the 1970s, women in this country couldn't get loans without getting or credit cards sometimes without their husbands signing the applications, and so I sort of making the point that even in our country, things weren't so great. Even I mean, I was alive in the 70s. I mean, I was a teenager, I guess. I can't remember how old I am, but I was certainly alive. And I also made the point that in 1994 was when we first did the Violence Against Women Act. And we've made a lot of progress since then. But this country, people, especially in developing countries, look at the United States and they think, oh, that you don't really understand our problems. You've made so much progress. And I say, you know what? We have made a lot of progress, but we have come a long way pretty quickly, at least in terms of women's rights. Having said that, I think that it is really important for us to understand that every country follows its own path. We can't fix the problems. What we can do is support women like the women you see here tonight who are changing their own countries. That's the way things are going to happen. You saw the women of courage. They're amazing. I mean, these women do things that I can't imagine ever doing. I went to Afghanistan and I was a little nervous because I get there and I have like a motorcade and all these guys with me, and I thought, you know what? I have a lot of security here. I'm not a courageous person like this young 30 or you're 20. How old are you, honey? 25. Who's not afraid of reactionary people in her own country, right? These people are fighting against really difficult forces. They're the ones who are going to make the change. All we can do is support what they do. And a lot of times, anything associated with the United States is unhelpful to them. So I think that's exactly the point you're making. We can't. It's not our battle. It's an evolution that they hopefully, I believe, will come to, and we can just try to support it the best we can.
What about this question, though, of gender violence that you mentioned at the beginning? What are the actual practical things you can do to stop gender violence? A place like Congo, for instance, how do you stop it? How do you do anything that's effective in a situation as savage as that has been and really continues to be for women?
Well, I mean, violence and conflict is just horrendous, and the stories out of the Congo are just devastating. And sometimes, I've said this in different contexts, but there are times when I hear stories. Some of you have probably heard Dr. Mukwege talk. I'm sure you've heard him. Tina had met him, and sometimes he'll say things, and I have to kind of stop what I'm doing and think, you know what? I can't even process what you just said, because there's such horrible things that human beings do to other human beings. And I have to really think about why is that? How do we do something about that? What kind of depravity is that would lead people to do things like that? And I think really all we can do is try to build up these countries in a way that they can deal with those. And so I'll give you an example. In the Congo, one of the things the United States is supporting is something called mobile courts, which are one of the problems there are that you have these soldiers and rebels and others now at this point who just go in and rape women in the most horrific ways with just horrible things and guns and shoot things into it. It's just really more than you want to think about. And so some of these cases have gone to The Hague, and they were building up this body of case law saying that these are crimes against humanity, and that's very important. It's a very important process going forward. But of course, we can only take a few cases there. It's far away. It's very expensive to do it. It's hard to get witnesses to go and all the rest of it. So there's a process where we are supporting this effort where we go in and train Congolese judges, prosecutors, defense lawyers, and they go around and they have mobile courts in different parts of the country. So they'll go to one place and they'll have a trial in the community for 2 weeks. And everybody in the community it's an open trial, so people get to see what happens, and they get to go in and testify. They don't have to go they don't have to go hundreds or thousands of miles away to testify. And so the community sees that justice is meted out, and justice has been meted out. These people end up going to prison. These soldiers and others who've done this, in the past have acted with total impunity because they never believed that they would be punished, caught, punished, or anything. That's starting to change. So that's all good, right? Because hopefully, it addresses the problem of what these people have done in the past, and hopefully it will discourage people from doing it in the future. But the added benefit it's starting to build up a judicial structure in the country that will be beneficial not just for this purpose, but for other purposes as well. Because in many of these places, there is no real government as we know a government to exist. And so if we can help build up those structures, ultimately the goal is that this country will take this on its own and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were in Turkey and you met, I think, with Syrian women refugees, I gather. And what did you see and hear is going on with the women there in those camps?
Well, it was sad because I think initially when they came into Turkey, I was in a place called Gaziantep, Turkey, which is near the Syrian border. And when they first got there, I think they expected that they wouldn't be there very long. And I think that it was just dawning on them that this was not going to change. When I was there, it was, I think, 100,000 people in Syria had been killed. It's now, 130, something like that. And so everybody, Syria is a small country, so all of these people knew somebody who had been killed. I think they just were defeated, I guess, deflated, discouraged. I went there and UNICEF was opening up a school. And so there was just this feeling of the camp being more permanent, and I think that was really discouraging to them. The purpose for me being there, in addition to seeing the refugees, was because we were trying to work with the women in Syria to encourage them to be part of the peace process.
And what sort of success have you met with?
Well, it's challenging, certainly. There are women on both sides of the delegations there, which is a positive. But it was challenging, and they would say to us, "Look, first of all, it's hard for them. Some of them were going back and forth into Syria, and they were so brave. Honestly, it was amazing the things they were doing. Some of these women would say, "We don't want to be part of," and this happens a lot. "We don't want to be part of the delegation because the guys on the delegation are thugs, and we don't like them." And I was like, you know what? They may not be so great, but you want to be in the game. It's not going to help you to be outside looking in and complaining. Get in there, be a part of it, and then hopefully we'll get to the point where when you're forming a government, we can sort of make things better. But I sort of take their point, and then the other problem in Syria, of course, is then they're worried about the reactionaries coming in on the other side, right, who are on the rebel side as well, but people who are very anti sort of freedom for women, and so they were very concerned about that as well. So it's just a sad place.
Well, Kathy, you must, I really wish you luck in this new job. Thanks. I think everybody here feels the same way. It's an enormous challenge, as you say, but I like the fact that you've got this focus, that you say the three things, and I'm sure all of us in this room would like to support you in everything that you're doing, and very much hope that that you can surge forward and have some success. So
thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thank you all very much for coming. Thank you particularly Toyota, who supported us so wonderfully with doing this event. I hope that as many of you as can will come to our Women in the World Summit on April the 3rd to the 5th. We have some incredible women coming. Lots of names you've heard of and lots of names that you haven't. When you leave tonight, you'll find in your gift bag a card which tells you how to get tickets if you would like to come. And thank you enormously for being with us in our first Women in the World gathering. We hope we'll come back soon. And thank you, Kathy Russell, and thanks everyone who participated tonight. Thank you. And to my co-hosts, thank you again.